Prince Harry has finally stepped across the line that everyone feared he would, and this time there is no turning back. His latest speech, delivered with eerie calm and the measured tone of a statesman, was less an olive branch and more a ticking time bomb. No raised voice, no wild gestures, just a cold precision that made the words cut deeper. To the untrained ear, it might have sounded like maturity, but to the palace, it felt like a carefully crafted detonation planted right at the heart of the monarchy. He presented himself as the truth warrior, the man unafraid to strip away illusion. Yet the irony was brutal. The very family he claims to love was once again the battlefield for his crusade. Each syllable carried an undertone of accusation, each pause loaded with implication. And then came the phrase that froze the blood in court circles. Harry said he was focusing on my father. A statement that should have sounded compassionate instead struck like a public diagnosis, a grim suggestion that King Charles's health is more dire than the palace has admitted. Commentators were quick to point out the effect. Focusing on my father was not heard as affection. It was interpreted as a calculated leak, a veiled obituary cloaked in filial concern. It was less about support, more about control. Harry dictating the narrative of his father's decline while cameras rolled. What should have been seen as care was instead branded a PR maneuver, a manipulation designed to put him back at the center of the royal conversation. The palace, already burdened by the king's condition, felt sucker punched. How do you respond when your own son implies to the world that your days are numbered? How do you defend against a family member who speaks softly but leaves scars with every sentence? Courtiers whispered about cruelty masked as candor, about strategy disguised as sincerity. And this perhaps is the cruelest paradox of Harry's new posture. By dressing his words in calm restraint, he makes them feel more dangerous, like a soldier who smiles as he plants explosives. He calls himself a warrior of truth, but from inside the palace walls, he looks less like a liberator and more like a saboteur. This was not just another interview. It was the moment he crossed the red line, and once crossed, it cannot be uncrossed. Another layer of the story has just been pulled back. Harry's insistence that he has no regrets about Oprah Netflix or the explosive memoir Spare was meant to project conviction, but instead it rang like defiance. With every repetition of "I would do it all again," he etched the divide deeper, confirming that the past is not just alive, but actively weaponized. To him, these episodes were milestones of truth. To everyone else, they looked like recurring grenades lobbed over palace gates. He claimed to love Britain, to carry its spirit wherever he went, yet in the same breath he condemned its monarchy, its media, even its people. It was a contradiction so glaring it became theater. The man who once wore military uniform with pride now stands at podiums condemning the very institution that gave him that stage. And when he leans into his veteran identity, critics see not honor, but camouflage. The cemetery photos told the story best. Harry standing beside wounded soldiers, somber and reflective, draped in symbolism, except the symbolism backfired. Instead of admiration, whispers of cynicism spread. Was this remembrance? Or was it product placement? For many, it felt like PR in military fatigues. Grief turned into backdrop. The optics were too polished, too neatly aligned with his truth warrior branding. What should have been sacred space turned into a photo op, leaving a sour taste even among sympathizers. One commentator captured the mood with brutal clarity. He's not standing with the fallen, he's standing on them. The charge was harsh, but it echoed a growing unease that Harry's narrative of authenticity is built upon the sacrifices of others. His critics argue that he has mastered the art of appropriating pain, wearing it like armor, then selling it to the highest bidder. The contradiction only deepened when he invoked patriotism. How do you claim to love a country while continuously mocking its pillars? How do you salute its flag while undermining its crown? The answer for Harry seems to lie in redefining love as perpetual critique. Yet for the public it reads as hypocrisy, an exiled prince who lectures from abroad while cloaked in borrowed symbols of loyalty. If the palace saw his first remarks as a bomb planted in the corridors of power, then this chapter felt like shrapnel spreading through the wider public. Instead of mending his image, Harry's declarations only reinforce the perception that every stage he steps on is less about truth and more about performance. It is hard not to laugh bitterly at this point. For a man who insists he is happy and unbothered, Harry somehow manages to appear on screen more often than the weather forecast. His mantra of calm detachment collapses under the weight of his own overexposure. If you are truly unbothered, why keep repeating it in every interview? Why make "I don't care" the headline of your public life? The image he projects is like a seesaw in perpetual motion, up one moment as the brave truth teller, down the next as the eternal victim. He alternates between pity and pride with such speed that it becomes dizzying to watch. One day he is the wounded son pleading for understanding. The next he is the fearless warrior bragging about his resilience. This oscillation, far from winning sympathy, erodes trust. The public no longer knows which version of Harry is real, or if either of them is. His belief that crowds still gather for him adds another layer of irony. At recent events, the reality told a different story. Empty seats, muted applause, a sense that the spectacle has grown stale. Harry seems convinced that the world hangs on his every word. Yet the photos betray dwindling attendance, the aura of fading relevance. The once magnetic prince has become more of a recurring headline than a compelling figure. Critics have begun to frame him not as the people's prince, but as the echo prince, a man repeating the same refrains to a shrinking audience. The tragedy is not that he lacks a platform, but that he seems unable to evolve beyond grievance. By declaring himself unbothered, he betrays how deeply he remains entangled in the very narratives he claims to transcend. There is a performance element, too, that cannot be ignored. He plays both roles, the wounded exile and the triumphant survivor, as though testing which sells better. And in doing so, he has blurred the line between authenticity and theater. To many observers, it looks less like healing and more like branding, less like confession and more like marketing. The more Harry insists on his detachment, the clearer it becomes that detachment is exactly what he lacks. He cannot resist. The stage cannot resist the microphone, cannot resist the spotlight. His greatest contradiction is not between loving and hating the monarchy, it is between claiming indifference and showing obsession. And that contradiction, played out in endless interviews, is slowly draining the last reserves of public patience. Meanwhile, on the other side of the story, Meghan's presence has been reduced to a whisper. She appeared only through a single recycled line: "Truth is the most efficient way to live." Once intended as a mantra, it now lands with hollow irony. Meghan herself has been caught in contradictions over the years, her own truths shifting under scrutiny, and so the slogan feels less like wisdom and more like a meme. It is as if she has become a hologram cameo in Harry's saga, appearing just long enough to deliver a platitude before vanishing into the background. This silence has left Harry exposed, standing alone at the center of a drama he can no longer outsource. Yet even here, illusion collides with reality. He believes there are still friends, relatives, and allies waiting to welcome him back. But the picture painted behind palace walls is starkly different: isolation, avoidance, and names left unspoken. William, once his closest companion and brother-in-arms, now refuses even to mention him publicly. It is not a pause in communication. It is a severed cord, a break that feels irreversible. The contrast is painful. Harry imagines a circle of loyalty still intact, but from the outside, it looks like a desert. Every step he takes in public seems framed by absence: the missing family, the missing crowds, the missing warmth that once defined his image. He is a man haunted by ghosts of connections he cannot revive. Observers have drawn a bleak metaphor: Harry wandering in a mirage, convinced he sees an oasis of family support ahead, only to find sand. Each attempt to reconcile is met not with water, but with distance, not with comfort, but with silence. And silence in royal terms is often more devastating than any spoken rebuke. Meghan's faint echo of truth offers no shield. If anything, it sharpens the contrast. Her absence underscores Harry's solitude, while her hollow words remind critics of how quickly slogans collapse under hypocrisy. The power couple that once roared with synchronized voices now feels fractured, one retreating into quiet, the other shouting louder into the void. For the public, the narrative is increasingly clear. Whatever bridge remained between Harry and his family is not merely cracked, it has crumbled. What he imagines as temporary distance has solidified into lasting rupture. The brotherhood once celebrated at Diana's funeral has withered into estrangement, and the silence of William speaks louder than any interview Harry could ever give. This is the moment when everyone must hold their breath. The image of Harry, once the brave young prince walking solemnly behind Diana's coffin, has now collapsed into something darker, a symbol of inflated ego tangled with royal resentment. The arc has shifted from victimhood to martyrdom, from relatable grief to a self-styled hero narrative that fewer and fewer people believe. In his attempt to reinvent himself, he has become the architect of his own decline. Stripped of the victim's cloak, Harry now dresses in the armor of defiance, playing the role of the fearless dissenter who does not care about consequences. But the act is losing power. The public can see the seams, the contradictions, the inconsistencies, the endless recycling of grievances dressed up as revelations. What was once cathartic now feels repetitive, even desperate. His audience is shrinking, his credibility fading, and yet his voice grows louder, as if volume alone could replace substance. The deeper problem lies in his strategy. Every new narrative adjustment, every attempt to clarify his side of the story only creates more confusion. He points to the press, the palace, the public as culprits, but rarely to himself. He edits, revises, reframes, and yet the picture becomes messier. It is a paradox he cannot escape. The more he speaks, the less coherent his image becomes. The more he insists on his truth, the more people doubt it. One critic put it bluntly, Harry's mouth is his biggest problem. And indeed, it is not scandal that destroys him, but his own relentless commentary on scandal. Words once his weapon have turned into quicksand. Each explanation pulls him deeper. Each revelation exposes a contradiction. Each defiant statement alienates those who might have still cared. The metaphor is haunting Harry, trapped in quicksand of his own making, thrashing to escape but sinking faster with every movement. What began as a fight for authenticity now looks like self-sabotage. Instead of building a new legacy, he is dismantling the old one brick by brick, while the palace, stoic in its silence, lets him unravel without lifting a finger. And so the final line is drawn. Harry has crossed it not in a blaze of glory, but in a spiral of words, too many, too sharp, too inconsistent. The prince who once embodied resilience now risks being remembered as a cautionary tale, proof that talking too much can kill the very truth you are trying to defend.